as much in your daily work, like with your MTLD or with our TLD team. This happened in recruitment and
placement, all of this stuff. I would, for example, where I'm most passionate about this movement, I would have been back at home. I would have been in New York. I would have been in New York, in inner city somewhere, Brooklyn, Bronx, somewhere that is home, because that's where I'm most passionate about all of this stuff. And I've kind of been removed from that. I've been removed from the roots of why I really feel for this issue.
What could you do? Okay, so I'm pushing you to transfer this ownership of what TFA is doing to me versus what I am choosing to do for myself. And I know this is hard because we have no relationship whatsoever. But where I would say this stuff to her all the time. What should you be doing, or what would you do differently if you could, reflect on it, to stay grounded in that? Even though the population is different and the opportunities were different, you're still in a place where there are needs.
Right.
So what could you do to stay grounded in that and not be in the weeds?
Well, at my school, I feel the one thing that is kind of overlooked, we see it, but we don't really discuss it, is that economically and I guess socially, the power lies with the white students and the white families, right? We're in a predominantly white area.
You're in Sandy Springs?
Sandy Springs.
Okay.
And these families have a lot of pull. The PTA, very strong PTA, but pretty much all white, with specks of difference in there. But demographically, we're Hispanic, 47% Hispanic. We don't see the same sort of power. Whereas I look at my advanced class and tag classes have specks of Hispanic. And then all on-level classes have Hispanic with specks of everything else.
Right.
And then I look at that disparity, and at my core, those two groups can't be being served the same. And I look at how white students, for example, got entry into my advanced class by just sending an email. And I look at how Hispanic kids don't have parents who would send those emails because maybe they don't know that they could, right?
Or they don't speak English.
Or they don't speak English. So what would I do differently? And this sounds so radical, but I think I would work harder for my Hispanic students, in that I would host after school specifically for my Hispanic students, because I would want to give something that is evening the playing field, rather than maybe having it open. When I feel like they're getting it through Kumon and Kaplan and all that stuff. I would want to host something just for my Hispanic students. Maybe even preview the material before I get to the material.
So why aren't you doing that? Go do it.
No, that would be looked down upon at my
So
school.
what?
They wouldn't, but I really don't feel like
that's fair.
That's
I got you.
Safe.
Yeah, I had a similar experience my second year. I was good. They loved me. I did all the stuff. I was a conformist, like you described. There was one, I think, pretty insignificant moment where I told my parents something that other people didn't want them to know, and got written up quickly. And principal stopped speaking to me. Mind you, she had me on the leadership team. We were in a good place. I was her person, but I felt like I didn't have tools to navigate that relationship when I needed to push and be radical, like you're saying. So, my battery's gonna die soon. This is a fantastic conversation, but I would say
something, and I know this because there was one time where I basically said we need to create programs just for our Hispanic kids. For example, we have all these programs, and I'll go to one of my Hispanic kids and it's like, oh, are you on a track team? No. Are you in a band? No. Are you in orchestra? No. Are you in chorus? No. Are you doing robotics club? No. No. We have all these programs, but there's no buy-in with our Hispanic kids. So we're not really serving them. And so I brought up that we need to do something specifically geared to them. And my AP went to my principal, who said that we wouldn't want to do something like that because it would not look good for our whole parent body.
Right. So you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of resistance because you're fighting a system. You're not, and it's not the individual people. Those people have good intentions. They're trying to protect the kids. They probably are coming from a really good place. So I want you to figure out how to be an influencer. So I think we just talked about this with your grade level. Yes, there's a lot of stuff in place. You don't have any power. You don't have a lot of voice. How do you be an influencer? How do you change people's minds? How do you manage a relationship to get people to do things that you know your kids need? Like that is not something Teach for America can teach you because it's so different for each person. But I think that is how we should shift our brand to help people navigate that.
Right.
Because nobody wants to be fired. You know what I mean? We have to talk about that. But at the same time, if we're not going to serve our kids, then what are we doing?
So that's the big thing that I was going to bring up, though, is when you're saying, how do we influence and how do we serve our kids? Like, and I know you were saying, let's not focus on what Teach for America did to me.
Right.
Not be the victim in the situation. But at the same time, I think in the recruitment and placement system that we currently have in Teach for America, it's stopping us from being those influencers in the classroom because we're no longer in areas that we might be passionate about. And you can say I'm passionate about education reform nationally, but he cares a lot about, black males in New York.
Right.
And I really wanted to be in high school in LA because I worked in those schools for 4 years. Those are the students I felt connected to.
Yeah.
And a year later, those are still the students I felt connected to, so much so that I applied to a teaching program over the summer in LA.
Yeah.
And it's that's...
But then how do you, could you just approach this situation of, these are not the kids I signed up to do this for, but I'm in this to understand the system better,
right,
so that if I can take this back to the kids that I signed up for, this will be valuable for me.
Well, and I think, you can find value in almost
that's not
anything
enough.
that you do.
Okay.
But I think that you don't maximize the impact doing it that way. Mm-hmm. And I also, so there's that issue, and then I also think Teach for America, and maybe this is because we're in the alternative certification program that it feels this way.
You both are?
Right.
Okay.
I think that it feels very much like we are a compliance group, that we're just supposed to comply with a bunch of requirements from, our MTLDs and our certification program and everything else, and we're not really pushed to lead. And I think the only thing that I really appreciate about Teach for America Atlanta that's different than everywhere else is that we have a leadership journey. And so the leadership journey for me was huge because we can actually step outside of the boundaries of compliance and actually talk about our leadership. But even in that, we're talking about leadership in the classroom, or how do we relate it all to leadership in the classroom, our immediate leadership role, and not leadership in our movement. And so there are things that we could do, right? We could push back on the organization, but we signed up to become part of an organization, so I think a lot of us are kind of just waiting for the organization to ask us for those things. And maybe we need to not wait for those things. Maybe we need to push back and just give those things.
Yeah. I'm going to stop soon because I don't want to lose this whole video because my battery dies. That would be very sad. Yeah. I would push you both to do that. Do it tactfully, do it respectfully, because like I said, my team works very hard. We don't try to pass off things that seem like are just for us. We really are thoughtful about that. But there's no way we can have your voice 100% of the time because you are teaching, right? So it's how do we support you and not take your time because you just said you're exhausted? We're very conscious of that. But we don't know sometimes what we need to ask. And so if you both shift to seeing yourself as TFA, my organization needs clarity on this, and I see myself as part of this, then you don't need me to ask you. Ask yourself, and you're TFA, and you are the representation of TFA at your school. Your principal doesn't know me. I try to interact with him. We've talked. You are TFA to your school.
Well, my principal is TFA also, so he's TFA. But that's a little
he
different.
He does not associate with TFA.
It's a very different
I picked that up in my first interaction with him.
This not even necessarily for this could be on video to get taught. But the thing is, TFA is recruiting everyone from within education, all that stuff, right? To support teachers.
Right.
If this were really a movement against the educational system that's there, because we're saying that it's deficient in some way.
Right.
We would be recruiting activists, leaders to just train people on the business of being leaders. It wouldn't necessarily be someone teaching you how to improve content delivery, how to make your vision come true in the classroom. They'd be like, oh, this is a leader who's going to teach you how to network with this person, and we're going to actually take you to these events, shake those hands, and you're going to implement this sort of movement right here.
Yeah. But so we do that. We do a lot of things like that, and the feedback is but you brought me here to teach, and I don't know how to teach.
See,
So I got to do both.
That's the messaging, though. So, like, TFA, this is what I'm saying. I'm exhausted because I'm a teacher. And I'm exhausted because everyone's saying I came here to be a teacher. And I decided to...
No, I'm saying core members say that. Like, I came here to teach.
I've been branded.
Okay. So you're saying you didn't come in for that.
Branded this.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm joining to be a teacher, not an activist.
Exactly. And that's
Okay.
not what it's about. That's
Okay.
really not what it's about.